organization, its staff, management, or sponsors.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teal. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teal, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm so glad that you could join us today. We have another awesome show for you. This is the program for family caregivers. So if you're caring for someone that really can't take care of themselves any longer, especially someone with some form of dementia, the show is for you. It's not easy, as you've probably found out, and matter of fact, it's probably one of the hardest things that you'll ever have to do. So the show was born to reach a lot of caregivers who maybe can't get out to support groups or attend seminars, who can't leave their loved one alone to go get the education. So it's another resource for you. And I'm so glad that you found us, and thank you for being here today. We are live from Boca Raton, Florida. You can find us live stream on the internet at caregiversolutions.info or local here in South Florida on the radio, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. However you're joining us, I'm glad that you are. So we talk about all things caregiving and all things dementia. We have a lot of people here that are experts. Matter of fact, most of the people we bring on have some kind of connection with caregivers, whether it be through the medical field, through the legal field, different areas that are important for caregivers to know about along their caregiving journey. Many times, we even have actual caregivers, spouses, adult children, grandchildren on the program who have agreed to open their hearts and share their story in the hopes that their story would inspire and help other people walking along the same path. So today we have a family member whose mother was diagnosed with dementia. Now, we've talked about a lot of different kinds of dementia on the show. The most prevalent is Alzheimer's disease. And a lot of people know about Alzheimer's disease, how it affects your memory. But there's many, many things that can cause someone to have memory loss. And today we're going to be talking about FTD, that's frontal temporal dementia. And it's different. And we're going to find out how it's different directly from a daughter who was very involved in her mother's care. And as a matter of fact, she wrote a book about it. So my guest today, I'd like to introduce you to Stephanie Levinston. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Marcia. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. Been looking forward for quite a while getting you on and talking about this, and thank you for agreeing to do that. Stephanie, you are many things, amongst being a daughter of a mom who was diagnosed with dementia. You're an author. You are a speech pathologist. You are a spiritual channeler or spiritual coach and intuitive channeler, right? And also a former family caregiver.
Correct.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. So we're going to break it down for everybody today because all of these things that embody you had a part to play in your mother's care.
Definitely.
And the book that Stephanie wrote, it's called Joining Joni, Staying Connected to Your Loved One Through Dementia and Beyond. And this is Stephanie's book, and we're going to be talking about the book and her mom and all the things that relate to her journey. So I first have to ask you, Joining Joni, obviously your mom's name is Joni, and she was diagnosed, but not right away. Mm-hmm. And eventually she was diagnosed with this type of dementia called FTD, frontal temporal lobe dementia, which is totally different than the Alzheimer's type of dementia that we just mentioned. As a matter of fact, in the foreword to your book, which I'm going to read a part of it, it actually addresses this. The foreword was written by Dr. Sharon Thoreau, Ph.D., clinical neuropsychologist, American Board of Professional Psychology, Division of Neuropsychology. And in her foreword, Dr. Thoreau says, unlike Alzheimer's disease, whose primary symptom is often a disturbance in memory, the initial symptoms of FTD include loss of impulse control, disorganization, problems with planning, and emotional dysregulation. Patients no longer perceive social mores and subtle emotional clues accurately, and drastic changes in their personality are common. Does that
sums it up?
Sums it up, right? So let's talk about this because obviously it wasn't just mom forgetting some things. It was totally different. Mm-hmm. And that was part of the problem, is that getting a proper diagnosis. So take us back to after everything was normal, what happened in the family? I know you were not living in the same state as your mom at the time, and she was living with your dad down here in Florida, and you were up north. So what started happening? What kind of feedback did you find yourself getting about maybe some things that were going on with mom?
Sure. One thing that we noticed when we spent time with her was we did notice short-term memory loss. She would not be able to hold on to conversations that we had just had. She would become distractible. And she was also having more episodes of agitation and frustration. Her moods were changing with some frequency, and we couldn't always pinpoint what had happened to create that change or shift in mood. She also was having moments where she would pace and kind of circle around certain areas of the house, almost like she had a purpose in mind but wasn't able to really execute whatever that was that she was wanting to do. And if you distracted her from that cycle, she would become agitated with that. She had some challenging situations where, and this could have been pre-diagnosis as well, just part of the personality, but where we would be out in public, and if she wasn't getting her needs met or attended to right away, she would show that frustration and agitation in ways to, say, a sales clerk or a waiter or waitress at a restaurant that felt really uncomfortable to those of us who were with her.
So that was out of her normal character?
Mostly, yes.
Mostly?
Yes.
So tell me pre-dementia, what was your mom like? What kind of person was she?
Oh, she was very in tune and in touch with other people. She loved being around people. She showed a very keen and genuine interest in others. She loved nature. She loved animals. She loved babies. And her social skills were excellent. She would really read other people's responses and reactions to her and respond appropriately. These were really good skills, good solid skills that she had. And we were starting to see some of those slip.
Yes, especially when she's losing those social mores and acting out, almost like embarrassing whoever was with her. And she probably thought that she was not doing anything out of the ordinary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can be kind of scary. It's like, what's going on with you? But even if you asked her that, she probably wasn't able to tell you, was she?
No, and it would oftentimes be turned. So it ended up being something that I was doing.
It's your fault.
Yes.
Yes, it's your fault. And that must have felt pretty hard and hard to accept. And did you disagree with that? Did you defend yourself in the beginning?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. I felt sometimes scapegoated and unfairly accused of things because that is what was going on. And it wasn't something that we could converse about because there wasn't a level of understanding. She really believed that her behavior was within her normal and really perceived it was her perception that was really off with the situation.
So that must have led to some minor arguments, maybe, between daughter,
Minor,
mother,
major, yeah.
husband, wife, right?
Yeah.
Because she's blaming others for what's going on in her life, what's wrong, and it's not her fault, and she didn't do it. Okay,
Yes.
so this is hard. This is the beginning, and this is hard for families to accept, is like, what's going on with you? And when she denies anything's wrong or can't tell you or doesn't have the insight to explain, it's really a problem.
It becomes frustrating for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Thoreau continues to say that in the initial stages of the disease of frontal temporal lobe dementia, affected individuals may simply be perceived as rude, which you said, forward, or lacking in social etiquette, and it is not uncommon for family members to feel embarrassed or even mortified by their loved one's behavior. Because personality changes often occurs prior to the onset of memory loss, these individuals are frequently misdiagnosed with a psychiatric disorder in the early stages of the disease.
Yeah. They gave my mom the diagnosis of depression, anxiety and depression for years before the proper diagnosis of frontal temporal dementia was made. And they kept telling both of my parents that when they could manage the depression, her symptoms of memory loss and personality change would subside. So we waited and we waited and we waited with different medications and trying. They went to different centers for a battery of tests and evaluation protocols, and finally we got the proper diagnosis, which of course there's not a medication. There wasn't at that time to help the situation, really, and it wasn't about depression and anxiety, although those things certainly come with dementia.
Yeah, many times. So she had the medication for depression. She probably went to a psychologist for talk therapy, and it really wasn't helping.
Right.
And so how long was it between these things starting to happen until she got a proper diagnosis? Was it weeks, months, years?
It was at least 5 years from the time we noticed the worsening of symptoms until she had the correct diagnosis.
5 years?
Yeah.
With all of this happening and not knowing what's going on, your whole family must have been in turmoil.
Yes.
Very hard to deal with this and live with someone behaving this way.
Exactly. We didn't know how to interact with her. I didn't know how to interact with her much of the time. I have a funny story, if we have time for that. My mom, as I mentioned, loved babies. And she used to approach young mothers with their babies and say, "Can I hold your baby?" or "What a beautiful infant you have." And most of the time, those mothers would trust a grandmother-looking type lady and hand their baby over. But with her dementia, she didn't have the filter in place to remember to ask permission of the mother to hold the baby. So she would walk right up to the mother and reach for the baby. And my sister and I had to have a practice in place of scanning everywhere we were. Is there a baby? Okay, if there's a baby, you watch mom and I will try to hide the baby so that she doesn't go and just grab somebody's baby.
Because here are new moms thinking someone's ready to kidnap her little child, and you had to distract from that. So,
exactly.
So you found ways to adjust your behavior so that mom's behavior didn't become a problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's exhausting.
So it is exhausting. This is good stuff because it's really a difference between in the behavior, especially like Dr. Thoreau said in the foreword, some of these things are personality changes and these behaviors that are going to manifest itself and come out before the memory. And then, shortly after you have all this. So you've got more than, one thing to deal with. And trying to figure out the right diagnosis took 5 years. And that's like a lifetime to some people.
Yeah.
So we're going to take our first commercial break. And when we come back, Stephanie's going to tell us more about Mom and how the family coped. So stay with us.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides.
Hi.
The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too.
And talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We are back, and my special guest today is Stephanie Levinston. She is an author, among many things that we're going to be talking to her about today. I'm so glad that you're here with us. She wrote a book called Joining Joni, Staying Connected to Your Loved One Through Dementia and Beyond. And it's about her mom, Joni. And I have to ask you, because it bears asking, the title of the book. You could have named it anything that you wanted, but I find it interesting in your choice of words, joining Joni. How'd that come about?
Yeah. Something very important to me through the entire process of my mother's dementia was to figure out ways that she and I could stay connected and that we could keep her connected to her world, to the people she loved, to our family members, friends, and keep everything as normal as possible, even though it was very far from normal. With dementia, it is really tricky to stay connected. You have someone whose literal pathways are breaking apart in their brain, and then you have somebody who's not experiencing that. So the burden of holding conversation falls on the person who's not impaired. And there are some tricks and some tools that I use through a lot of trial and error that I knew I needed to put in the book so that people can not have to make the same mistakes that I made, and also use some of the tools and techniques that I clinically used in my practice as a speech therapist, because I've had over 20 years of working with people who have dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, and that really played a crucial part in caring for your mom. I read your book from cover to cover. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And you have a lot of chapters in here, but they're short. And I want to tell everybody they're easy reads, which makes it a nice book because, you get right to the point, give the example, what you did about it. And I think that people can even almost pick and choose what chapters they may want to read if it applies to them. So you have, some of them are obtaining the correct diagnosis. We've already talked about that because you had to continue to go to doctors until you said, hey, this isn't working. what you said is not helping. The medicine's not working. Let's just keep going. And you keep going, and 5 years later, you finally got the diagnosis. And she was only about 56, you said, when
About
she
that.
was properly diagnosed. So these symptoms were happening, you said, 15 years prior to?
She was in the process of dementia for at least 15 years before she passed. Yeah.
So it's a long time. It's a long journey. And, that's why they say also it's the long goodbye, because it lasts a long time for many people going through this. And she was so young, and, which makes it even harder, because you don't expect someone so young to be experiencing this memory loss, And as people get older, we all have some memory loss, but not as severe as someone is 56. That when she was experiencing it, it just really blows your mind. No pun intended. So you have a lot of chapters in here, and one of the chapters that I found very interesting was about communications and how you have some of the tricks up your sleeve to deal with some of her behavior. So I have a couple quotes from your book that I'd like for you to talk about. One of them says, "Facts can be an enemy for a person with dementia. It is often much kinder and infinitely smoother to go with the flow, even when he or she is wrong." So how did you come to that revelation? Because we know it's true, but every family has to come about their own conclusion, right? From trial and error. So tell me about that one, facts and go with the flow.
That comes about after many experiences of arguments that went nowhere. So it doesn't matter really if your loved one who has dementia believes that it's Thursday and it's really Monday. It doesn't matter. And so since it doesn't matter, you can choose to go with their perception, because it doesn't change anything about. You still know it's Monday and you know what things you need to do, and they can be in their reality of the experience of it being Thursday, and nothing changes. Whereas if you try to reorient them and insist, no, it is Monday. Look, here's the calendar. Look, no, it's the 21st. You see here where it says the 21st is Monday? Look, come here. It's silly. It's silly.
Well, they're just going to argue with you.
They're going to argue, and ultimately, if you end up being right and they acquiesce, then it's a distancing. It's not a connection. You just have come out the winner, which there's never a point in that anymore.
Yeah, there's no winner.
No, exactly.
in this game, and which I love that example, because that speaks to the title of the book, Joining Joni. So you're actually joining her in her world, in her perception of her reality of what's going on, instead of asking or demanding of her to join you.
Yes, and it can be a lot more fun joining somebody else's world. If you can be open-hearted to it and open to the creative experience, then why not?
Yeah. Go with the flow. Yeah.
Yep, follow their lead, figure out what's important to them. So it's not necessary that you figure out or help them find the exact right words for what they want to say. Words at some point become a little bit irrelevant. It's the communication that's important, and their desire to be in communication with you that is worth supporting.
Right, because if you were to try to convince her, and like you say, maybe you twisted her arm enough that she would acquiesce, how likely would she want to continue to have conversations with you, because she's always going to be wrong and you're always going to be right, and she's going to feel bad about that. So she may just say, forget it. I'm not going to even do it.
Yeah, and a lot of people do withdraw.
Yes.
A lot of people do. That's part of dementia, but I think sometimes it might happen prematurely after so many experiences of having what they say be corrected.
The negative experiences with that. Well, that's certainly important for people to know and understand. In another chapter called Communication, you say, "I am suggesting that you show understanding even when you have not a clue as to what is being communicated. Bear with me here. You go on and you say, as a speech language pathologist, I can tell you there are many ways for people to communicate. Verbal language is one, but we also have facial expression, body language, vocal intonation, gestures, eye gaze, and eye contact. You can learn to pay closer attention to all the communication tools that your loved one is using. So I love this too, because not only are you learning how to communicate with your mom with your words and going with the flow and not correcting her, and more getting the meaning of what she's trying to say rather than the actual words, getting the context. But there's many other ways to communicate with somebody. Now, you are a speech pathologist, and you have been for over 20 years. So do you think that your experience and your training as a speech pathologist helped you in joining Joni in her dementia?
Absolutely, it did. It actually was a tremendous asset to have had the experiences that I did clinically, because I had seen a variety of individuals and personalities and presentations with how dementia can vary from one person to the next. I'd also had the opportunity to observe family dynamics with a lot of my patients and be able to support the family members in staying connected to their loved one who had dementia. I will also say, however, that it can be a double-edged sword, because I came to the dementia table thinking, I've got this, I can do this, I've got all these years of clinical experience, I've studied this, I know this. And when it's your family member, it really is totally different.
It hits home.
Yeah.
And it is different. And I hear that from so many professionals that have the training and the expertise and the experience helping families and helping those, with dementia, and making those things easier. But yet when it's personal, all the rule books are out, because it's too personal. I think you're so close to it, and that you can't sometimes separate, the professional speech pathologist, the professional, person who has this training and education, and separate that person from the person who, this is my mom and I'm her daughter, and this is not what she used to be like, and I don't know how to relate to her anymore. And it's hard to, combine those two to have a good outcome. So I guess the point here is, let everybody know that don't worry about that if it happens to you, it's normal. Yeah, it's very normal.
Yeah, and to ease up on yourself a bit too. It's not fair to have unrealistic expectations of yourself in that context. You will get emotionally involved. You will have reactions to things. That's typical, and you're human. So I had to show that kindness to myself over and over and over again when I would react in a way that wasn't what a good speech therapist would do.
or a good daughter. Gotcha. Yeah, that's really, really tough. But you have found other ways, and I'd like to get a couple examples here of other communication techniques, because there's not one way to communicate, and especially when people with dementia start losing the ability to communicate, when their words become word salad, it's all mixed up, when they can't find a word, when they say lots of words and they know in their head what they're saying, but you can't understand what they're talking about, right? It's very frustrating and hard, but know that there's just not one way. And nothing's black and white either. When you're talking about caregiving and dementia, there's nothing totally right or wrong or black and white. There are things that are better to do than other things, but you got to do what works, right? And so obviously you found some things that work. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Stephanie's going to give us some other examples of how she communicated with her mother, who was diagnosed with FTD, in many other different ways. So we'll be right back.
Do you need the
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know.
or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Thank you for coming back with us. We have another half hour of wonderful information about dementia with a diagnosis of frontal temporal dementia. And before we continue with our guest, Stephanie Levinston, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care Communities. Arden Courts is a leader in the field of caring for someone with dementia. They only do memory care. That's all they do. So they have about 50 communities across the United States and 10 right here in Florida. One of the things that Arden Courts likes to do and feels it's their mission to do is also educate the caregiver. And one of the ways that they do that, besides sponsoring this show, is by having a resource library in all of their locations. And in addition to that, they have books. And this is one of the books that Arden Courts would like to give you, a family caregiver, just for the asking. It's called The 36-Hour Day, and it's a guide for family caregivers dealing with dementia, Alzheimer's, other types of dementia. It's a wonderful resource, and if you'd like to have this book, it's absolutely free. All you have to do is call Arden Courts on their toll-free number, tell them that you heard about it on the show, and they'll be happy to get your name and address and mail it right to your door. So take a pen and pencil and write down this toll-free number. It's 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410 to get your free copy of the 36-Hour Day book. It's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it. So my guest, Stephanie Levinston, is talking about her experience with her mom, and frontal temporal dementia is the type of dementia that your mother was diagnosed with. And we're talking about communication techniques and how you learn when things got tougher, when she couldn't communicate as well throughout the disease process, how you connected and how you continued to joining Joni, the title of your book. And one of those ways is through nonverbal communication. And we talk a lot about people with dementia losing the verbal skills that they have. But you've listed a few other ways to communicate. And as a speech language pathologist, you know, this is something that I think would behoove others to learn about, because you're educating them through your own experience. And so we have facial expression. Give me an example. We'll just go through a couple of these and tell me how you learned to use facial expression to understand your mom.
So a lot of this has to do with the fact that you already know your loved one really, really, really well. And so trusting what you know of them, what you know of their personality, what you know of their needs, you could probably predict in most situations what needs they will have coming up just by virtue of the fact that you are already connected to them and that you know them very well. So learning to trust that and leaning into the trust of that, I think, is essential, because then you can use whatever they have at their disposal that they can offer to you. Facial expressions, body language, gestural communication, where they're looking with their eyes, how they're directing attention towards them, to pull in a complete picture. So if, for example, if your loved one's going, "It's so bubbly in here," you know what they mean. It's not bubbly in here, they're cold. They're telling you that. You can see goosebumps on their arms. They're holding their arms. Pull in all of the little nuanced pieces to what you observe and apply it to the context that they're communicating. And again, no need to correct. You don't have to tell them, "Do you mean it's cold? I think you're saying it's cold. Can you tell me it's cold?" No, we're not going to do that.
Just leave it go. Let it alone.
You say, "Oh, it is a little chilly. Let me turn off the fan. Let me go grab your sweater." And you keep a conversation flowing and going that way. In terms of other things with facial expressions, you can tell a lot by somebody's facial expression. You can tell if they're happy, if they're pleased, if they're displeased, if they're angry. And if you're paying attention and your observational skills are keen, which I highly recommend you sharpen them if you have someone with dementia in your family, then you can pull together more of the story. You can support the communication by how you understand them to be experiencing things in that moment, to allow you to respond appropriately to them and take the burden off of them.
Yeah, and that's important, you know, because they do have that burden and they feel it. I think that people that have memory loss, that are suffering from some type of dementia, I personally think that their feelings become heightened. Maybe they don't have some of the other skills that they've lost, but I think their feelings are more sensitive. That's just what I've observed over all the years, you know,
I agree.
working with caregivers and their loved ones.
I agree. And I think it's worth saying that do everything possible not to talk about the person in their presence or within earshot ever, because they still are a person and they still can hear and sense what is going on, even if they don't always understand the message you're conveying. And we would have to tell caregivers a lot to be very careful. I would never speak about my mom in front of her caregivers. I would call them on the phone after their shift, or if my mother was napping. You really want to protect the dignity and the privacy of the person that you love, and nobody likes to be talked about, so it's important.
Yeah, and then sometimes people wonder why their loved ones are paranoid, you know, and because you hear about that, they're paranoid, they think we're this. Well, obviously, if they hear you talking about them and you're not sharing that with them, they have a right to be paranoid. So, yeah, there's a lot of little things that caregivers can do to make their days of caregiving a little less stressful and a little bit better. So one of the things that that you share in the book is really the whole family dynamics. You know, you had a family that was a great support, and it seemed to me that from what I read, your family was all on the same page and very supportive of the whole situation.
Yes.
And so anything that you could share about that with some tips or things on how you maybe shared responsibilities in the family to help?
Definitely. One of the things that helped us was we all read a book about this particular type of dementia that my mother had. The book was called What If It's Not Alzheimer's? And it's about frontal temporal dementia. So I highly recommend finding good, solid, evidence-based information so you can educate yourself and the family members and the caregivers about what's going on, so you can be on the same page and plan together. Another thing that I did that I value to this day is this was once I lived in the same city as my parents again, I would have regular dinner meetings with my dad. And we would talk about what was working, what wasn't working. If a caregiver was having a problem or something that needed to be worked out, we would figure out what our approach was going to be. My sister lived in another state, so I would call her after these meetings and I would appraise her. So everybody knew what our plan of action was and how to support one another. Sometimes I would call my sister and I would say, I need a little bit of a break. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I had very young children at the time, so there's a lot of being pulled in a lot of directions. Could you call Dad and help this situation? Or could you do some research on such and such? And she would jump right in and take care of that. So learning to rely on those who you love, they want to show up for you. It is a gift for them to be able to serve. So I encourage you to ask for the help and allow others to step up and support you.
Very important, the communication that your family had. It sounded like, you facilitated that, and it was important for family members to all know what was going on so there's no surprises.
Yes.
And I love the family meeting type of thing. Even if you're not in the same state or the same city, you can conference call, you keep everybody in the loop, you can email. And the fact that you actually asked for help is wonderful, because a lot of caregivers feel that, they're afraid to ask for help, or what would someone think? They might think that, I'm lacking, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, And it's not about you necessarily, it's about what's good for your loved one. And if you're stressed out and you can't handle it and you need a break, unfortunately, that's going to overflow negatively to your loved one. They're going to feel that.
Always.
Yeah. So I applaud you for that. That's really, really, really great. So caregivers, take note, ask for help, communicate with the family, and these are all really, really good tips. Now, there's something also in your book, which I was actually surprised how you labeled it. And after I read it, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And it was called The Gifts of Dementia. How could there be gifts with dementia?
This is actually why I wrote the book, because what kept occurring to me in the years since my mom's passing was that there were so many beautiful moments that we shared, and so many things that I learned about myself and about life in general, and so many ways that she and I found to stay connected that I knew I wanted to give that to others and share with others. And there are many gifts. There's nothing like dementia, a progressive neurological illness, to put priorities in place for you, to structure time once you know that you only have a certain amount of time with someone at their best. And with dementia, the present moment is always their best.
They live in the moment, for sure.
Exactly.
And that's one of them, the gift of time, right? So you know that you have so much time. And along with that, the gift of the priorities, right? So you had small children, you had a mother, a father helping him to care for your mom. And it was a gift for you to realize, to be in the moment, see what was happening, be there in that moment of time. And that was a gift, because it opened your eyes to what was going on and to what was really important. Another one, the gift of nonsensical communication. I like that one.
Yeah, I like that one too. And it was especially helpful to dabble in that while my kids were young. So with dementia, oftentimes there's a lot of nonsensical communication as your loved one tries to find the word. And sometimes doesn't come up with anything that really is a real word. And then you can laugh about that with them. You're obviously not laughing at them, but there would be many moments where my mom would try and try and try in her verbal communication to get the word out, and eventually she would just say and we would look at each other and just roll in laughter, because I get that, Mom. That sometimes things just need to end, and that's all right, and we move right on with it. So,
and she laughed too.
She laughed too,
and that created a moment for both of you to connect through the laughter.
Yes,
being silly sometimes.
Yes,
sometimes it's great. Just when words don't work, make up things, be silly, do a silly dance.
Yes,
say some silly poems or rhymes.
Yes,
and whatever works, right, to connect with them. How about the gift of intimacy?
Well, the process of supporting someone through dementia, I think, is filled with moments of intimacy. When you care for someone and you love someone, there is that intimate connection. And so there can be levels of sharing that come at unexpected times. And if you are present with them, fully present in the moment and paying attention, there can be things that they share that you would never have expected them to share. And you can honor that through the intimate connection that you're having with them. And so dementia just does bring a new level and layer of intimacy that is, a lot of people don't know about it because we look at what is being lost and what's falling away rather than what's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes they have moments of clarity and lucidity in the memory loss. And sometimes also because they also lose their filter where they might hold things back previously. You get those little gems.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
those are the special things you're talking
Yep.
about.
And write those down. Create your journals and write down the things that are so moving.
Yeah. And then there's another one, the gift of patience and forgiveness.
Yeah, that's a big one. The forgiveness always works for the person that you're forgiving and for yourself. The forgiveness piece is really for you. I forgive myself for the times when I was impatient or intolerant or frustrated or showed irritation or aggravation or shut down the communication. I did all of that. And that's okay. I forgive myself for that. And through that process of forgiveness, I allow each new moment with my mom to be a fresh start because I'm not dragging in negative feelings about myself or feelings of where I might have failed her in the communication. And then, of course, naturally, the forgiveness of any of her behaviors that she has no control over because of the illness, that don't need to be held on to either. Everything can be cleared. You can hit the reset button in any moment.
Every day is a new day. Right.
Every moment's a new moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that very much. We'll be right back with more from Stephanie.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney? Perhaps you find it difficult or overwhelming.
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. The inability to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's, particularly among the family members who care for them. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to us. We know. We understand. We can help. Arden Courts. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com.
Info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back, and my special guest today is Stephanie Levinston. She's the author of this book called Joining Joni. It is about staying connected to your loved one through dementia and beyond. And I am loving your stories and loving talking to you about your experience with your mom who was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. Unfortunately, she died at a younger age. I'm so sorry for your loss. But you wrote the book, and the book is an educational tool to help other caregivers know how to communicate better with their loved one. But one of the things, besides you being a author and a speech pathologist that we've been talking about and how that also helped, you're also a spiritual coach and you do intuitive channeling. Now, this is what your practice is currently, and somehow, and you'll explain, how that evolved from mom, right? And how did that happen, and what's that all about?
So when I refer to myself as an intuitive channel, what I am saying is that I receive messages from the spiritual side of things to support and benefit others in their lives, no matter what it is that they're struggling with. So it's not only dementia related, it's really across everything that I channel about. But I really feel that my spiritual unfolding took place during the process of supporting my mother through her dementia. I had to find more ways to connect with her than what was readily available through communication. I had to rely on my intuition to know what it was that she might need or want to say, and to connect in a way that was different than how we generally connect with one another. So spiritual connection is very real. It's certainly very real to me. And it's something that we all can have, I believe, with one another. So I have made it my life's work right now. It is what I do professionally. I no longer do speech pathology. I work with clients all of the time, every day, who are looking to connect with their loved ones through the spiritual realm.
Now, these are people that have lost a loved one that they want to connect with?
Some, and some are people who are still here on the earth with them, that they're still in relationship with, alive.
So, okay, I just have to ask the question.
Yes.
So you help people learn how to communicate with somebody that they love on the earth?
Yes.
Why can't they just talk to them? Why can't they just pick up a phone and call them?
Yeah.
I mean, is there really a problem here?
Yeah, so you can always pick up a phone and talk to someone. What I do is we are peeling away the layers of personality, and we are going to the soul, directly to the soul. I believe we all are souls having a human experience, and I also believe that we have come to the earth with a lot of background in experience previously in terms of other lifetimes. We all have different beliefs around that. But what I'm basically doing is, for example, I work with parents who want to hear from the soul's perspective of their children, whether they're young or grown. How can I best support my son or daughter? They're going through something right now. I don't know what they need from me. You can ask that in a phone conversation, but you're going to get all of the filters that we put in place when we are in our personality. You're going to get some stuff that's covered up by ego, some stuff that's covered up by fear. And when we go to spirit and to the soul perspective, all of that is stripped away. We just get pure truth and love about that. And so I oftentimes get very specific guidance for my clients based on what it is they're wanting to hear about and who they want to hear from. I also can channel my clients' own higher self or their own soul's perspective, find out where they are on their journey, what's working well for them, what they might want to pay attention to, why they find themselves to be in particular patterns of behavior that might be repetitive. It spans a whole lot of things. I know it's a whole nother show.
Yes, it is. And you may have to come back for this one because you've definitely piqued my interest. And you actually gave an example at the end of your book, and I have to admit, you made me cry, or you didn't make me cry, I cried. You can't make me do anything, right? I cried because it touched me when you gave an example, the story about how you felt your mother, after she had passed, was visiting your family in the form of a little red bird at the window. And it touched me because my mother recently passed away about 1.5 years ago, and my mother actually is there connecting with me through a certain song. And I thought at first it was coincidence, right? But we learned there's no such thing as coincidence, and everything happens for a reason. And when it started happening more often, in the most bizarre circumstances, I'm like, it has to be her, right? It has to be. There are No doubt about it,
Yeah.
right? So this is really interesting because you're, helping people to connect and to relate on a different plane, a different level altogether.
Absolutely. And it is my absolute belief that our souls go on. They're immortal, our spirit. And so there are ways to stay connected. And some ways are through special songs that come through at strange times. Sometimes people see a certain coin on the floor. Sometimes it's through nature, an animal visiting us, as it was with that. Sometimes it's other unexplained things. If we are awake and paying attention, we can be present to all of that.
Yeah, and it's really cool when it happens, right?
Yes.
It's like, whoa,
It's amazing.
right? And
Yeah.
you just being aware and paying attention. So we've had a great time together talking about so many things, and I so appreciate you coming and sharing with us and giving us all of your experience and expertise. If someone who is listening or watching would like to reach out to you for some help, maybe in the spiritual realm, are you open for being
Sure.
contacted?
Of course.
All right, tell everybody how to contact you.
Yeah. The best way is to go to my website. It's www.stephanielevinston, that's LEVENSTON.com. You can schedule a session and pay for the session all online.
Easy peasy. Thank you so much for being here today. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining today, too. I hope you liked it as much as I did. There's so much more to learn and to talk about. So we will be back, same place, same time next week. In the meantime, don't forget, give somebody a hug because they need it, and so do you. So we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teal. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.